I'm going to unpause us here. We can get started, and I will just let people in as they join. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for being here for what is probably our last virtual event of the summer. We'll see what the fall looks like, but we're hoping to get back to in-person events. But thank you all for being here at the beginning of July. We are really happy to have an interesting mix of people today, a lot of whom I don't know, but some are in France, some are here, and a lot of people who have not participated in a French-American Chamber of Commerce event before. So thanks for being here. I'm Andrea Jett. I'm the Executive Director of the French-American Chamber of Commerce of Chicago, for those of you who don't know me. Just to give you a little bit of context for the session, we are going to be recording the session, and we'll send you a link to the recording afterwards. We'll also, the panelists said that it was okay to send you a copy of their presentation, so we'll do that as well. I'm going to turn it over to them in a minute, and then we will follow up with some Q&A. We'll open it up to everybody who's here to ask questions directly. You can do that, or you can just put your questions in the chat, and I will ask them for you. I ask that you please mute yourselves while they're speaking. If you can't do that yourself, I'll do it for you, no worries. But thank you. Welcome to JP Cannellier and to Brian Mehta for being here today from Marketing Movers. I'm really looking forward to hearing your take on what not to do when you're trying to launch your business in the US. So I will let you take over from here. Thank you both very much.
All right, thanks so much, Andrea, for the introduction. So good morning, and if anybody is dialing in from overseas, good afternoon, I guess. Welcome on this Zoom call. Before we start, just a quick intro. So I am JP Le Cannellier. As you can guess, I'm French. I've lived actually in 4 different continents throughout my life. I was, a traveler from a very early age on. I have 30 years of experience in marketing, in luxury goods, consumer goods, luxury goods, technology, and entertainment, both B2B and B2C. And we'll talk in a minute about Marketing Mover, which is how Brian and I, the founders, are bringing that knowledge to our clients today. Brian.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Mehta. I, too, am a marketing veteran with consumer tech, telecom, health tech, and fintech experience. My most recent position was Chief Marketing Officer at Trading Technologies, a SaaS-based software and data service provider for capital markets.
All right, and as I was mentioning, we founded Marketing Movers. At our core, what we do is we work with European companies to help them craft top-notch marketing activities in the US. Every situation is unique. We work with our clients' objectives. We develop anything from tailor-made, sales pitch, website, email actions, digital, and more depending on the need. The idea is, that we will put in place whatever actions and strategy are needed based on your objectives. So our talk today
is titled "The Top 5 Marketing Mistakes to Avoid When Launching a Business in the US."
And this is where I think there's the audience, I think, who's going to probably most benefit from this is somebody who doesn't know the US market or doesn't know it well enough. For those of you, and I know there's a few on this call, for those of you that actually have been here for a while, this might be more of a reminder of maybe some of the past experiences or some of the things you learned, the hard way or the easy way. But again, think of this as we're making this for somebody who is at the bottom of that learning curve, which is a big steep learning curve of understanding how the US culture operates and what it means in terms of marketing.
And we're going to do something a little different to help demonstrate our point, and it involves a little role playing. So hopefully you'll find it somewhat entertaining. I'm going to play the role of the French entrepreneur who's founded a startup in France. I first launched this business in France, and it's been going very well and have some ambitious expansion plans. My next step is to take the business to the US.
And I am playing the role of a local businessman. I'm the CEO of a company that could potentially partner with Brian's. I've got a lot of connections that could really help Brian propel his business in the US. I've heard about Brian and his project. I'm intrigued about what he does, what his company does, and I want to learn more, again, for a potential partnership. So we've agreed to have a formal meeting. We're going to get together, and Brian's going to come and present his pitch, and we're going to discuss potential next steps.
So the first scenario is before the big meeting. And as JP said, we're going to meet for about an hour. And I've been planning my preparation and my presentation for JP. And I've worked through this big deck and really ready for the meeting. But the day prior, we run into each other at a networking event and we have a short conversation over coffee.
So here we go. We're starting with this kid. So hey, Brian, really nice to meet you. So I know we're meeting tomorrow to discuss your project, right? But since we're here grabbing coffee, I'm curious, why don't you tell me a little bit more about it right now?
Yes, JP, great to meet you in person. And it's great that we met during this networking session. So let me think. We've been working on this project for many years now. We made quite a few changes to where it is at this point right now. And I have a handful of European investors that have helped me, and we're coming to the US to develop the project and the business here.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you've made a lot of progress, but can you tell me a little more, like what exactly is the solution about, and what does it do?
Yeah, so it's a little hard to explain. I would rather share it with you tomorrow because I will have my slides and it'll be easier to explain it to you. I know you'll be impressed. So I hope you could wait till tomorrow.
I guess we'll wait until tomorrow. Okay, pause. Just to kind of digest this first scene. Mistake number one is not being prepared.
And that's not a good first impression.
And that wasn't the best first impression. And this is something we've seen and experienced time and time again. What you need to do is prepare yourself and prepare various versions of your pitch. Sure, you have a big meeting set up and you have an hour, for example, to present your project. But think of you be ready for different versions of that pitch. It could be a minute-long pitch with no slides, what we call typically the elevator pitch. It could be a 30-minute version of the bigger pitch as well. So essentially, the takeaway here is prepare different versions of your pitch that are timed, that have different lengths of time. Anticipate key questions. Think of what it is you think your audience is going to be interested in knowing more about, and be ready with your answers. And the more you present your project, the more you're going to hear questions that you didn't think of, and those are going to be added to your arsenal of questions. And the last point here is rehearse, rehearse, rehearse. There's never too much time dedicated to preparing for this very important phase, which is your initial sales pitch.
Okay, so scenario number two, the big meeting. We're going to meet in this room. Everything's planned as supposed to for an hour, but already 10 minutes have been eaten up just introductions. JP brought a couple other people from his team over. I'm setting up my my machine and getting the presentation ready. So really 10 minutes have gone by in an hour presentation. Now I'm ready to present. Okay, I'm very excited to present to you today, but before I begin and describe what we are offering, I'd like to go over a little bit about the history of the project.
All right, so at this point, I'm going to basically explain what happens. Brian is going to start talking about a bunch of different things. How he founded the company, the fact that it's being subsidized by the French government that happens to ask a lot of questions, the fact he has an engineering degree. They have had long discussions about coming to the US market, and they're very excited. His partner comes from a prestigious business school, and so on and so forth. what happens is he has a lot of stuff that he's putting in front of his presentation, including the fact that he prefers the taste of coffee back home than here in the US. Not surprised, right? And in the end, what happens is the clock is ticking, and at some point, I'm going to look at the clock and interject. So back to a real life situation, I'm like, hey, Brian, let me just pause you right here. This is great context. Thank you so much for sharing all that background information with us. But I just noticed you're already halfway through the allocated time we have for the meeting. So why don't we just jump into the core of the matter? Talk to us about your project, because we want to understand our partnership possibilities.
Sure. Yes, let's get into it. We make software that helps companies and their operations. The software is capable of doing many things. It could save time, reduce costs, improve employee satisfaction, and support environmentally conscious initiatives. Let me show you.
All right. So again, I'm going to narrate what happens next, which is that basically Brian starts to present a very long PowerPoint deck, and there's a bunch of slides. Each slide is very text heavy. There's a lot of bullet points on any particular slide, meaning the audience has to work really hard to absorb the whole message. The other issue is it's a lot of slides. And as we said before, he's essentially starting to get into the core of his pitch halfway through. So he's not going to be able to finish. Again, after 25 of those slides, I'm going to step in and go, hey, Brian, fortunately, we're up against the clock right now. And my team and I need to get to our next presentation. Now I feel bad because we haven't been able to hear the entirety of your presentation. So perhaps we can figure out a way to finish the conversation over the next few days. How about I send you a text tonight and we figure out the next steps?
Okay, yes, that would be great, because I do have more to present and I didn't realize I was out of time. I wish I paced myself differently. For sure, yes, let's meet again before I fly back again at the end of the week.
All right, so mistake number 2 is poor time management.
That's the second impression that wasn't well met.
So let me be the one saying this. Europeans and us French, I think we have a tendency to take up too much time and use up too many words to deliver the message. This is in contrast with how we communicate in the US, particularly in business meetings. Things are fast-paced, time is limited. So what you need to do is, first of all, if you have 60 minutes, you really only will have 40 or 45 minutes to present, because the rest of it is going to be what we call small talk and introductions. Favor a shorter presentation with fewer words. Get straight to the point. Map out the timing. Think of it as, look, I'm going to need 5 minutes to do this section and another 10 minutes for this other section. Don't forget to be punctual. Meetings generally will start on time and will also finish on time here. Very important. Rehearse. We made the point before, we're going to make it again, and we'll make it several more times. Prepare yourself, rehearse, time yourself, and make sure you leave enough time for Q&A. This is a very important part of any meeting, Q&A, question and answers. So you want your audience to be engaged, and you want them to be asking you questions, or maybe wanting to clarify or just build on what you were saying or presenting. And how marketing helps deliver on this whole thing is we can help you with making your storytelling concise, being very clear about the call to action and the relevance of the message that you're presenting.
Okay, the next scenario. So in between the two meetings, I tell JP, take a look at my website. Very excited to get him engaged and have him explore more of the company. So I am really excited about, we've just finished the English translation of the French website, and I want to share it with him. So the scenario.
Brian, so as you suggested, I took a look at your website. Yeah, interestingly, what's presented on it is a bit I would say is different from what you and I saw the other day, from what you showed us. How so? Why is the difference?
Oh, well, you see, the website you saw is a translation from the French website. It doesn't talk about our new solution that we're developing for the US. To be honest, my team in France developed it, and I didn't have enough time to check their work.
Got it. Makes sense. Now, let me ask you, I was a bit puzzled about something I read on your site, which says our solution gives you the commodity of managing your affairs faster. What did you mean?
Oh, what that means is that it's much more efficient for your business.
Okay. For a second there, I thought there was a little bit of, you were trying to mean something really different. Okay. So here goes mistake number 3, which is we're going to call it translating instead of adapting, and this is something we see a lot of.
So what can you do? Really, you need to first start auditing the key message elements that are essential for your communication efforts, whether it's your website or main collateral. The key here is don't just translate. You should adapt. At minimum, create a US-centric promo page that summarizes your offering. To do it more correctly, build out a US-centric website that is curated for your go-to-market efforts. It's really not hard to do.
Awesome. All right, let's keep moving. So the next scene is called closing the deal. And the context is, despite the initial communication and cultural challenges, I still feel like there's a real opportunity to work with Brian. So right after our second meeting, I sent him a quick email basically saying, hey, I'm interested. Why don't we, and my proposal to him is that we signed a document that allows us to basically start exploring a potential partnership between the two companies. I am showing him my willingness to move and to get into action with him with that email. Now what happens is Brian is going to sit on that email for a couple weeks before he responds. So following that, I basically say, look, let's just jump on a call, you and I, let's just talk again, right? And so here we go, we're talking. And I'm like, okay, Brian, the fact you responded to my email after 2 weeks makes me think we might not be on the same page. So I thought it'd be best to discuss in person and we can, clarify any potential misunderstanding.
JP, I am interested in a potential collaboration between the two companies, but I need more time to process our different conversations. Also, I'd like to speak to my team and have our respective attorneys engage very soon.
I see. Well, look, those are reasonable requests. No issue there. Maybe what we could do here is, do you feel like there's a timeline when we can get together and, get to that point, or how do you feel about this?
I'm still not sure if I'm going to be ready to enter the US market. So I'd rather prefer if maybe we revisit the situation in a couple months.
Okay, a couple months. So we can do that. I just can't guarantee I'll be in a position to move forward then. But if you need that time to, circle the wagons internally, I understand. I wish you all the best. It's been nice meeting with you and hearing about your plans, and I wish you good luck.
Okay, mistake number 4, not striking while the iron is hot. You have to do that. Business moves fast in the US, even in traditionally slower sectors. Moreover, decision makers can be capricious, but they often pride themselves on making quick and decisive moves. This is part of the self-reliant, manifest destiny, rugged individualism zeitgeist of Americans.
So how do you address that? Always keep in mind that business moves fast. Decision makers are going to make bold moves. And what you need to do is be reactive or proactive. Think of it as your response time should be minutes or hours, not days, and certainly not weeks. You need to be conscious of the pace being different. And if you're going to be successful, you're going to need to adapt to the pace of how things move, in the context of American business. Moving on to our next one, which is the contract phase. So the last situation builds off of the previous one. So we won't role play it, I'll describe, and then we'll get immediately into the fifth mistake. So I would say, despite the back and forth and difficulties in communication, I still feel there's a great product opportunity and I want to do business with Brian. Enough so that I'm willing to discuss a term sheet, a more formal legal way of engaging our two companies together. So I asked Brian to put together a term sheet, which he does. Now the term sheet I get is full of legal jargon that doesn't really apply to the US or makes it really difficult for an American company to engage. Which leads us to our fifth mistake.
Being difficult to do business with. So as we mentioned, business moves fast. So you need to be flexible and you need to move fast. So the first suggestion within this scenario is you have to spend some time with a US attorney to craft some legal documents that are fully ready for the US market. And again, rather than translating from your French legal documents, you're going to be better off building from scratch to optimize the language and purpose. And these include, but aren't limited to, the master service agreement, the term sheet, a scope of work. Now, you may be asking yourself, well, this isn't really a marketing mistake. And I think, to be clear, in the broadest sense, marketing is about convincing the other party through communication to take some action. This is just an example related to legal work, but it's just one step within a well-crafted go-to-market effort. So yes, this is something where we could assist from the standpoint of building a complete work-back schedule in your go-to-market efforts.
All right, so we've reached the end of our role-playing situation. So let's recap. Let's take a look again at those 5 mistakes we illustrated. Those mistakes were, number 1, not being prepared. Number 2, not managing your time optimally. Number 3, translating instead of adapting. 4, not striking while the iron is hot. And 5, being difficult to do business with. Now, Brian, what can we do about this?
Yeah, so obviously there's many different things that could apply to these mistakes. And actually all these answers probably apply to the mistakes. Just to summarize, as we said, be prepared and rehearse. That's applicable to everything. You need to anticipate, you need to anticipate and get to things very fast. Adapt, build things from scratch. That is your best bet to get the clear and concise messaging for the US markets. And again, as I mentioned, things move fast. You got to think in minutes and hours, not days and weeks. And lastly, be flexible, because that's how you're going to be able to do business and be easy to do business with. Now, we summarized things and it came down to some pretty easy 5 problems and 5 answers. Obviously, it's much more complex than that. Obviously, we did a role play that was a parody of reality. Hopefully, it was a little bit entertaining. Hopefully also, though, that parody highlighted some of the real root causes that we see in business today.
So thank you for your attention. And now we're going to be opening up for questions. Andrea, back to you. Lead us the way.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you both. That was fun. A fun way to present your points. I guess just so a couple things. So just sort of concretely, if you're planning to sell a product or a service or a brand in the US, just so not only in terms of the approach, but just in terms of the actual messaging, which you mentioned a little bit, how do you have to think about what a US audience wants to hear about your product or service versus how you would present yourself in France or in Europe. So how do you have to be able to think about that differently?
Let me take this one. I think in France, a typical presentation, and again, I'm going to broad stroke the situations. Things tend to be, every situation is unique, but I would say generally speaking, in France, when we present something, we tend to be, the pitch tends to be much more about, here are all the 15 to 20 great things my product or service does. Whereas I think in the US, the expectation is, tell me how what you're doing solves my problem. And I think that that's something we need to adapt to, because it's not necessarily natural. A French businessman is not necessarily going to want to go there. But I think if you're tailoring your presentation for an American audience, I would say don't be afraid to say, based on our understanding of your situation, you have the following challenges. This is how our product or solution solves your challenges.
And I would also argue, and I've experienced this, startups in particular are very focused on internally the product centric. As we parodied, they want to tell the history. They want to tell the funding backing. They want to tell everything leading up to the product. Whereas the receiver, the audience, they want to hear about themselves. They want to hear about how you could help me and my problems or my end user problems. So from a marketing standpoint or a lens of communication, that's what we think of as marketers when we tell stories, is what's going to resonate with your audience as quickly, as succinctly, but as most impactfully as possible.
Yeah.
So given that there's also a market research and sort of, business preparation aspects to marketing and communicating, if you were to give somebody sort of a list of recommendations on how to, so not just coming prepared to the actual meeting with the right materials, but what do you really need to do to lay the groundwork to be successful?
Well, I think you mentioned one very important element, Andrea, which is the market research. I would say learn as much as you can about your audience. Go to their sites, pull up annual reports from the company, from your prospects. Try to understand what their challenges are, because that's going to be the hook that allows you to make yourself relevant to them. The more you're able to say, here's what I understand of your business situation. And look, the audience knows you're not an insider at this stage. So they're not expecting you to come up with secret information, but they are expecting you to have done some due diligence up front, do some research, walk into the meeting with a point of view on what your audience's challenges are and how you can help them. And the clearer you are about that, the more impactful and the more relevant you'll be.
And what I will say is, even before that, be honest with yourself. Know what you don't know, or at least admit to know what you don't know. Because if you're self-aware and say, okay, I am willing to have an open mind to do that research, you'll be steps ahead when it comes down to actually interacting with a potential client.
Okay, that makes sense. Do you have any examples? Because it's always fun to hear case studies. Do you have any examples of maybe of both of a company, of course, without naming names, but a company that was not successful and why you think that was the case, and then in contrast, one that did really well and why you think that one did really well?
Let me answer you on the first one. So the example of a company that wasn't so successful. That company initially came to the US wanting to sell the entirety of their product line. Essentially, another way to look at it is they came in with the throw spaghetti at the wall approach. which essentially, another way of saying this is, they wanted to let the market pick the best product or solution they were bringing. And they didn't really make much progress with that approach. They weren't getting a lot of meetings. They weren't getting a lot of follow-up meetings if they had the opportunity to have a first meeting. And that changed the minute they said, okay, we're not going to try to sell the 15 product lines we have. We're going to pick one. We're going to pick the one that we think is best suited for what a US audience would need. And once they zeroed in and became very focused on, we have one solution, their website went from selling 15 different ideas to one. That's when they really started making inroads. Now, it took them about a couple of years to get to that point. So I think part of the trick is don't make that, try to avoid the mistake before it happens, and try to make that process. In this case, we're talking about single-minded focus, but do that at the very beginning rather than sort of learning it the hard way.
If somebody were to ask your advice and say, okay, I want to be prepared and I want to be successful, how much time would you recommend that somebody take before even entering the US, before even doing that, to prepare, to do the market research, to figure out who their target audience is, to prepare their communication materials and translate them, of course, not literally, but in a way that actually is a cultural translation. And then in terms of budget, I mean, if you were to sort of give somebody a reality check and say, look, if you can't do these things, then you're not ready.
I would say, so time first. Understand that coming to the US is a monumental venture. So even before we talk about time and money, I would say make it a priority as opposed to a side project that I'll get to when I've dealt with my other priorities. If you really want to come to the US, one of the great things about this market is it's big and it's very open to new ideas from anywhere. But you got to take it seriously. So you got to be willing to make it your full-time job, essentially. Now, in terms of how much time, I want to say it's probably at least a 3-month effort. It depends what your starting position is, but I would say it's a good 3 months of testing, validating, researching, learning about your competition as much as you can, and laying the groundwork for that. And I would say after 3 months, you should be clear on how big you think this opportunity is. You should have had enough information available to say, look, if I come to the US and we do X, Y, Z, and we achieve A, B, C results, this is how much we think we can generate in terms of revenue and business for ourselves.
And of course, again, going back to my comment, know what you don't know, get help. And that's one of the reasons why we're here is, we could help, I wouldn't say accelerate that time frame, maybe from if you went alone to that compressed 3-month time frame. Obviously, we are encouraging strike while the iron is hot. So if you're in the midst of your research and there is an opportunity to have a meeting with a prospect, you want to grab that opportunity, but it's a lot easier to do that if you have help versus you going it alone.
Speaking to your second part of the question, Andrea, which is budget, look at it in 2 different ways. So there's an initial budget that you need to be able to invest to figure out if coming to the US is the right move for your company, for your business. And that's kind of the initial 3 months that I was describing. There, I would say it's probably a few thousands of dollars that you're going to invest mostly in research, maybe in a couple trips to test the waters. And let's assume you've done that and you have, so this is not where the most of the investment comes in. You're literally spending money to get a sense for whether or not you're ready to come to the US. If you got to the point where you've got the answer and the answer is yes, then you need to start thinking about investing to grow your brand. There's a lots of different permutations of that. B2B, B2C is one way to look at it. Obviously, if you're building a brand direct to consumer, it can be very expensive. The other thing about marketing is you can quickly and easily spend money on things that aren't going to return for your brand. And that's one of the other things we can help you with, which is avoid spending money on things that are just not going to move the needle for your business, and double down on the things that you really need upfront, which start with an optimized sales pitch, a website that tells exactly the story of what you want to do to a US audience, and maybe some digital and email efforts to go along the way to drive traffic to the site.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's a good point. Some of the prioritizing your investments. I wanted to give everybody on the call a chance to ask a question. Please feel free to unmute yourself and just jump in and ask a question. If you'd rather put the question your question in the chat, that's fine too. Feel free to turn your cameras on also if you want to introduce yourself and talk directly. You can pretend we're in the same place even though we're not. So just feel free to jump in.
And I'll also say, if anybody feels more comfortable asking a question in French.
Right. Yes. Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah. We can also translate. Okay, everybody, we have a shy group this morning. So
Go ahead.
hang on.
Hello. My name is Frederick Sender. I work for Groupon. I work with a lot of small businesses here in the US. And my question to you both, or to the audience, is what is the time frame that you see it takes a French company to go to market? What does that typically look like from the time they start to successfully penetrating the US market? That's it.
It can be a while, Frederick. I think 12 to 2 years, 12 months to 2 years is a generally the kind of time frame we see. Part of it, I think, is just the pace. The differences in pace between the two cultures. Jokingly, and I hope you guys took it that way, we were talking about that email that I send in the skit, and that Brian takes 2 weeks to respond to, which is a very normal thing. Things take time. Things shut down in August. I suppose I'm not the first one to mention that when it comes to doing business in France. So you have to account for all this, but yeah, it'll take a while. It can take up to 2 years for a French company to go from sort of seeding the original idea of doing business here to being in a position to be ready to hit the go button.
There's a comment in the chat. Just a comment on the fact that the expectation regarding customer service is much higher in the US than in Europe. And is that something that you would advise people to be mindful of? And if so, how?
That's a wonderful comment. Thank you for bringing that up. Absolutely true. So this is also something I think European companies don't necessarily understand, and you have to spend time convincing them about it, is that if you're going to launch a product or service here, your customer service needs to be ready to go, from day one. Remember, this is a culture where a lot of the purchasing has, gone online. There's an expectation that when you order a pair of pants, you'll get 2 sizes, with the return envelope for the size that doesn't fit, free of charge. I mean, there's a lot of thought that has gone into great customer service here. And if you want to compete, you need to understand that, and you need to be able to step up. And yeah, that's a big difference with how customer service is handled in France or in Europe in general compared to here.
Yeah, I mean, I think the good side is there's a lot of great examples to benchmark from. The tough part is actually implementing it, right? So that's the gift and the curse.
And those are some of the interesting trade-offs. When you discuss a marketing investment, it might make sense to put more money behind customer service because that's going to be a point of differentiation relative to other ways of investing your marketing dollars. But those are great discussions, starting with the point of understand how the customer service expectations in this market.
That's interesting. Do we have any other questions from anybody on the line?
Hi, I'm Indra. I'm based in France. Actually, I'm a student. I was wondering, because you were talking before about some investments that French company tend to do, but they are not necessarily at first. So do you have any example of those?
Yeah. So again, I'm going to generally speak, understanding that every situation is unique, but let's say you're a company that wants to get the word out. You want to reach a broad audience and tell them about what you do. And if you do it well, you think that that's how you're going to bring in business. The first thing you should do is have a website and direct traffic to it. One is you control your message on the website. You get to choose exactly how you're going to present your product or service. And chances are you'll do a good job there. So have a really top-notch website and direct traffic to it. You could do it many different ways. You could do organic search, paid search, email, other type of digital activities. But generally speaking, that's where you want to start. And also those are all examples of activities where you can get a reasonable measurement of the return. You get to see what kind of traffic those different activities are driving. You get to see how good a quality the traffic is. Meaning, do people spend time on your site? Does it look like they're engaged? Does it look like they want to know more, etc.? By contrast, there's a lot of other ways that are harder to measure, and by definition will make it harder for you to understand the return. So, for example, think television, paying to be at a trade show, print ads. And again, I don't want to necessarily make it look like these are bad things. This isn't the point. The point is you should probably think about prioritizing. Generally speaking, you'll want to prioritize digital before you go and do other things. But thanks for the question, Indira.
Thank you for your answer.
No problem.
Anyone else? Any other questions?
I do have a follow-up question.
Sure,
You talk about the how to use certain marketing channels when entering. When do you see French companies use social media in the US as a way of engagement, since the US market when it comes to social media is very different than other parts of the world and how they use social media to engage? How does that translate?
Social media should be part of your initial, sort of tier one marketing action, for sure. I mean, hugely important in the US. The thing to keep in mind is to do it well, I think you need to have a clearly defined brand and brand voice. Because essentially that's what you do when you do social media. You're creating a dialogue with your audience, and you're trying to be interesting to them. So, but yeah, for sure, assuming you've done the homework and you're clear on your brand, your value proposition, absolutely, do social media. Also understand that once you start doing that, it's sort of like you can't stop. You have to be able to do this, and it's not stop and go. It's like if you're going to post on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, you got to be ready to do it over the long run.
Is this focus on brand and brand voice? Is that do you find that that's a very American concept, or is that becoming more of is that becoming more global now?
I mean, I don't think it's purely American. I think when I was studying marketing back in the day, that's being taught. the importance of value proposition or positioning. All these things were very relevant, are very relevant, and you shouldn't start investing to grow your brand unless you've been you've done the homework and you've clarified all these things. So what's your brand? What's your brand value? What's your personality? What's your value prop, etc.
For an existing company in Europe coming to the US, their brand is probably there. I think the key is, how does that brand convert into the voice of US? And I think that's the biggest thing, because you can't just, again, as we said, translate it and people will get it. I think that's the nuance that's important when you're bringing your business to the US. And there might be some tweaks and nuances that you have to be aware of, cultural idiosyncrasies. For a startup, let's just say, I think sometimes that gets deprioritized in the effort of launching. And so again, if part of the startup's effort is to launch in Europe as well as in the US, it's almost a non-starter if you're trying to go into the US if you haven't done those fundamentals. And so I think that's another thing to I think aid, or we could help aid, is advise a client that's in Europe to almost get the fundamentals right in the native country, let alone taking it to market in the US.
Great, that makes sense. Does anyone else have a question or a comment? Either you can ask directly or put it in the chat. I'd be happy to ask it. Just for fun, and I'm curious, are you doing anything in the reverse direction? So are you at all helping American clients think about how to present themselves in France or anywhere else in Europe?
Not yet. I think that'll be we're talking about priorities before.
Yeah.
Now we're working from one direction to the other. But yeah, who knows? Maybe one day we'll try that as well.
Yeah, I'm sure that presents its own challenges, right?
Yeah, of course. It's anytime you try to take two cultures and match them together, which is what we've been talking about for the last hour. Yeah, there's always I think. By the way, if there's one final word for this is any of these situations, I think you need to approach with humility and be curious and be willing to change, adapt, be open. Most of the time, the best solution comes from, doing that, being humble and flexible and open.
That makes sense. If there are no last questions or comments, I would love to give the two of you a chance to add anything or point anything out, or anything else that you would like to add in conclusion.
We will be sharing our presentation through Andrea, and like JP mentioned earlier, feel free to reach out to any of us or go to our website, and we're here to answer any further questions that you might have offline. But we really appreciate everyone's time and chance to hear our little soliloquy on mistakes, and hopefully you learned a couple things along the way.
Thank you. I thought you weren't supposed to say go to my website. I thought that was.
Well, thanks everybody for entertaining us.
And I will send a follow-up email to everybody on the call and everybody who was registered but wasn't able to make it, with your contact information, your website, your presentation, and a link to the recording from today. So thank you both very much. It was great to see you, and thank you for closing out our virtual sessions, at least until the fall.
And you all have a great rest of your day, and great summer.
Great summer to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.